Hello, and welcome to our Wednesday webinar from the International Centre for Sustainable Carbon. My name is Benedicta, and I'm part of the communications team here. Our monthly webinars are based on our technical reports, which are available from our website, sustainable-carbon.org. Residents of member countries and employees of sponsoring organizations can download our reports at no charge after a one-off registration at the website. Please type any questions you have in the questions box as we go along, and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. The subject for today's webinar is Emissions Monitoring in India, Ensuring Valid Data for Effective Reduction Strategies, presented by Dr. Leslie Sloss. Over to you, Leslie.
Thanks, Benedicta. Hi, I'm Leslie, and today I'm going to give a summary of some of the recent work carried out by the Centre in India under our ongoing US Department of State project work in the region. This part of the project focuses on monitoring of emissions of pollutants from coal utility boilers. Just a reminder that the Centre is an autonomous technology collaboration project run under the auspices of the IEA. We are dedicated to delivering clear and unbiased information on the use of coal, waste and biomass for sustainable energy production. Please check out the rebranded website to find out more about our reports, webinars, blogs and events. Today, I will focus on the challenge for emission monitoring in India. Now, India has introduced new emission limits for coal plants, and consequently, plants must now monitor their emissions to ensure that they're in compliance with these limits. Now, the Indian authorities have developed relatively strict guidelines to ensure that all relevant sources, including coal utility boilers, install instruments that are fit for purpose and which report directly to the pollution control boards in real time. Although the strategy is one of the most well-defined in the world, challenges remain with implementation of the requirements in practice. Emission monitoring requirements have existed in regions such as Europe and North America for several decades, and so lessons learned in these regions could help pass forward Indian stakeholders through known problems to ensure that compliance monitoring in India is reliable and functional across the entire fleet within the next few years. Important for me to note that this work forms part of a significantly larger project of work which has been assigned to the Centre under a grant from the US Department of State. The project aims to provide capacity building in India and Indonesia to reduce emissions of both mercury and other pollutants from the coal combustion sector specifically. The first phase of our desk work in Indonesia is complete, and around a third of the work in Indonesia, the portion focusing on plant flexibility, is also complete. And information on these projects is provided on our dedicated outreach page of the ICSC website at the bottom there, so please do check it out, and I'll talk about this slightly more at the end as well. But today I'm going to present the results of our desk work on Pillar 1, as we call it, in India. We reviewed the status of emissions monitoring at coal utility boilers in order to build a comprehensive picture of the challenges for limiting emissions for coal power plants in the region. We're now building a network of stakeholders to determine an accurate assessment of the current emissions monitoring strategies with the aim of collaborating on the provision of training in the region. This desk report is already available as free as a one-click download from the website. If you wish more information, and you're free to email me if any questions that we don't have time for at the end. But please do put those questions in the box and I will try to answer them live in the end of this talk. Now, these data are for a previous report from the Centre produced on behalf of the CIB by Adams, Lockwood, Waitrose, Matika and Baruya, I believe. And they also produced a very informative webinar on this, which of course can be found on the website. Now, the data indicate that India has a significant public health issue with respect to high level of pollutions from all sources. And the coal utility sector is currently responsible for a significant portion of these emissions, unsurprisingly. We're seeing a lot of emissions coming out of these coal-fired power plants. There is a switch, sorry, to go back, there is a switch to cleaner plants, and this should mean a reduction in emissions from the coal sector relatively soon, especially if there's a move towards closing down of the older plants. Now, these are the new emission limits in India. They effectively mean that existing coal plants in India have gone from virtually no restrictions on emission limits within the last decade or so to having to meet the equivalent limits set in countries and economies such as Europe and North America. And this poses a significant challenge for many Indian plants, not least because the compliance timeline is relatively short. They've only been given a number of years to pull their plants up from having relatively few restrictions to having relatively tight emission restrictions. And so as a result, there is ongoing negotiation in the country, which is resulting in derogations, exclusions, and variations to the requirements to accommodate options such as timeline extensions, relaxing of limits in the less populated regions, and reduced limits for plants with higher stacks. Regardless of the current volatile status of these emission limits, the Indian government has confirmed the requirement for emission monitoring on all units, not just on plants, but on every single unit within each plant. And this means that even if confusion continues over these standards and limits, coal plants will have to start to report their data now and going forward directly to their local and national pollution control boards. And this information is vital, and the data, therefore, must be accurate and verifiable. Now, actual emission data are incredibly useful for emission reduction strategies. Currently, many plants in emerging regions use generic emission factors or engineering factors to estimate emissions, and this can lead obviously to significant over and underestimation of emissions. Actual emission data will inform local and regional authorities where emissions are at levels which may be of threat to the local communities. And this could help with strategies to focus on improving air qualities in regions of most concern as a priority. Actual emission data will also help regulators to identify plants which may be repeat offenders with respect to elevated emissions, and action can therefore be taken in these plants specifically and accordingly. Actual emission data will inform plant operators of their own challenge so that they can modify operation or install appropriate control technologies to meet these emission limits. Many commercial SEM systems commission continuous emission monitoring systems. These are little bolt-on measurement strategies. They can be bought off the shelf practically in a box ready to install on the side of a plant. However, you have to remember these are very sensitive and specific engineering systems. They're designed to analyze complex gas mixes coming from a stack, which are sampled at high temperatures, several hundred degrees in some cases, and are designed to analyze quite complex gas mixes. So you've got trace elements, you've got sulfates, you've got acid gases, and so on. And so all at the same time, these machines have to be bolted onto the side of a stack. So selecting and installing a SEM system which is appropriate to the job is actually a complex challenge, and it does require expert guidance. This diagram shows a simplified flowchart of how to select and install a SEM system for monitoring particulate emissions. The first consideration is, of course, the sampling point. And even this is more complex than you might think. The sampling port, the little hole in the stack that the probe will go through, must be in an accessible location on the side of a stack. So it has to be somewhere where staff can reach this access by stairs on the outside of a chimney and install a fairly sensitive measurement unit which must be safe from the outside interferences, such as weather. At the same time, the position inside the stack must ensure a representative sample, and so it must be away from any equipment in the stack which may affect the flow and the homogeneity of the stack gas mix. Testing is therefore required before the final sampling location is decided. Then the operator must choose a suitable SEM system. Now, in Europe, SEMs are certified as fit for purpose, so the operators can only select from a pre-prescribed list of SEM systems which have been tested and pre-approved in practice. And this system is different from what there is in the USA, where any SEM system can be used as long as it can be shown to be fit for purpose once it's in position in the stack. And this involves testing it against a defined reference method. I don't want to go into the difference in these two approaches too much here, but it's important to know that India appears to be going down the European route, requiring that SEM systems be certified as fit for use before they can be installed. And this is discussed in a lot more detail in the associated report. So once the location is selected and the operator has agreed to work with approved systems, the selection process moves into consideration of the flue gas conditions. If the flue gases are wet, then some of the SEM systems may have problems with flue gas conditioning to ensure that water or steam doesn't affect the measurement process. And the operator must also be aware of approximate concentrations that he's expecting these SEM systems to have to measure. Some are more sensitive than others. If an operator chooses a system that can measure up to very high concentrations of, say, particulate matter, they may find that when emissions are reduced, they become so low that they cannot be accurately measured by the existing system. Conversely, systems tuned to monitor low concentrations may be damaged or affected badly when they're used at high concentrations. Basically, the SEM systems themselves may be self-contained and bolt-on, but installing and operating them requires a team of qualified decision makers at every step of the process. This table just summarises the difference between the SEM operation standards in Europe and the USA. I haven't included all the details, but I do want to highlight that the differences are quite significant. The European approach of certification does give the SEM buyer the reassurance that they're buying a system that has been tested and proven to be fit for purpose. But it does mean a much reduced choice. Not all commercially available systems are certified. It costs a SEM producer hundreds of thousands of dollars or euros to get their system certified. And therefore, there is a chance that certification is limiting the market choice and market development in these regions. Conversely, the US approach allows operators to buy any SEM system they fancy, but then the onus is on the operator to run a relative accuracy test to demonstrate that the SEM is fit for purpose and gives the same data as a standard reference method. And this requires skill during the installation process. Once the SEM is in place, the operational guidelines between Europe and America are relatively simple. There are requirements for calibration, correlation, functionality, and so on. But the aim is the same, to ensure that appropriate SEM system is used and operated and maintained in such a way that it will deliver reliable and accurate data continually. So let's look at what is happening in India. As I mentioned earlier, the Indian government requires that SEM systems be installed at all relevant emission sources, including coal-fired power plants, on every single unit. The authorities also require that the data from these systems be delivered directly to the reporting agency in real time and in a tamper-proof manner. This means that SEM systems must be connected to the data handling system, which then feeds the data via the internet to the servers. These servers are monitored and controlled directly by the central and state pollution control boards, a system that's relatively advanced and quite unique to India in some ways in the level of security through the whole system. The data from the monitors at the plants can be accessed by the plants themselves, either live in front of their faces at the SEM machine or through the server and the internet accessors. It can also be accessed by the regulators. However, the data are not shared publicly. The data are monitored in such a way that if a plant has emissions which go above the emissions standard, the system will immediately record an exceedance event. These exceedances are flagged and reported. Depending on the scale, timing, frequency, and so on, the central server may send an email, a text message, or ping a relevant source app on the operator phone, and this will advise the operator that they are out of compliance and that remedial action is required. Now, this is an excellent system in theory. However, the very nature of it relies heavily on technical expertise through the whole chain, but also on appropriate actions and responses being taken at either end. In addition, and as far as I'm aware, this is unique to India, the real-time SEM system established by the regulators has the capacity to perform a remote calibration. Now, calibration is when we use a test sample of known concentration and we inject it into a SEM system to check that the SEM is measuring the right values. And normally this is done in-house live in front of the SEM system by the user. In this system, however, the regulator can press a button in a different state and calibrate a SEM system in a plant in a completely different region of the country. Now, it's understood that this approach is intended to halt tampering with data through incorrect calibration of SEM systems, and that's fair enough. However, remote calibration introduces potential new problems, not least the assumption that the SEM in the plant in the other region has enough of the correct calibration gas available, that the gas is up to date and is connected to the system ready for random instances of calibration. So the system is advanced and it's very detailed, and it covers everything that needs to be covered. However, there are systems still to be asked as to how effective this will be in practice, unless everybody's applying it up as they should be doing. Now, for this project, we wanted to evaluate to what extent SEM systems are actually being installed and being used across the fleet in India, as opposed to what is required. We want to see the actual values. And we got this data from our stakeholders in India, and it has been extremely useful. Now, the data in the table at the top there are the same as the data in the graph, so you choose however you like to read your data. The graph on the left is for particulate matter, the one in the middle is for SOx, sulfur dioxides, and NOx, nitrogen oxides, is on the right. The area shaded in green on each of these shows the number of coal-fired units in India which have SEMs installed and operational. Quick glance shows us that fewer than 50% of the plants actually have SEMs operational for target pollutants right now, whereas it should be 100%, according to the Indian government requirements. So there are obviously some issues still to be addressed. The area in orange in each graph shows plants reporting no data. Now, this could be because there are no SEMs in place yet, or it could be that the SEMs are not operating or connected to the real-time system yet. Interestingly, up to 10% of the plants, that's the little bit in yellow at the bottom there, they do have SEMs in place, but they're reporting issues with delivering data. So there are still practical issues about getting the information out of these systems and into the reporting. Now, working with our Indian stakeholders in India, we've determined issues which remain within the SEM approach. And we have to thank Sanjeev Kumar Kanchan for this, because he has worked heavily in this area. The issues include installation, operation, maintenance of the system, as well as potential issues with data handling. And all of these issues can be rectified by appropriate training. Now, this is a list of ways in which some plants have been found guilty in the past of data tampering and false reporting. While the highly automated approach that's being discussed should address most of these issues, training of staff, the delivery of recognised and valued qualifications in SEM installation, maintenance and control will go a long way to improving self-regulation and increase trust throughout the whole industry, as trust certainly seems to be lacking. So let's step back for a minute and remind ourselves of the task for India. India has set challenging emission limits, and if this legislation is to achieve the reduction in emissions hoped to improve the air quality, then there must be a way to monitor these emissions accurately. To deal with that, the Indian government has declared that all coal units must have SEMs installed as soon as possible, and this is happening, and it's happening very rapidly at an impressive rate. However, India just still doesn't have national standards for important factors such as calibration or for training staff to operate these SEMs correctly. These are evolving in real time in India right now, obviously slowed down by the COVID situation. But the SEM installation programme continues at the same time as the certification scheme is being determined. So India needs to create its own standards and training to ensure that SEM systems are applied appropriately for their needs across the country. But since such systems have already been established in Europe and America, it does make sense for India to adopt some of the groundwork that has already been laid in these regions, learning from both and developing an approach which is most appropriate to the Indian challenge, to choose what suits them best, to mix and match, but then to deliver a certified standard that everybody in India can work from going forward. Now, with our US State Department grant, the ICSC plans to work with both international experts and Indian stakeholders to enable the development of an Indian-specific standard. At the same time, we can share expertise and leave a legacy of knowledge in India, training the trainers so that they can launch their own capacity building initiative going forward. Now, these are the aims for our capacity building workshops in India that we hope to get started within the next couple of months. We want to introduce training materials show them what's available in the USA, in America, in Europe, for them to choose what suits them best. To deliver training directly to the stakeholders. So we want to get the utility staff, everybody involved with this, regulators and ministries, face-to-face events at 4 regional locations in India, probably Hyderabad, New Delhi, Raipur, and somewhere else. Hands-on training, ideally if we can get equipment suppliers that are based in India, that would be perfect. If we can have people having experience in real time on site, preferably at a plant, showing how this works, dealing with the challenges, seeing what how it's all done in practice, basically. Intense training, we hope to train several individuals within India so that they can continue to deliver this training going forward. And also we'll leave legacy materials that they can evolve to suit their own needs going forward. And the full report that I've just summarised here is available as a one-click download right now. It includes a review of the current emission limits, as I've discussed, an outline of the SEM requirements detailing those live feeds, a summary of the internet-based reporting system and how they perform the alerts and the feedback, the assessment I've just given on the status of SEM operation, of what's installed and where. We have some regional data but not included there, but we have that if anyone's curious. And our proposals for how we plan to deliver the training capacity building within India over the next few months. Please do check out the landing pages, the project webpage, which covers all our work for the US State Department, and that is updated with new reports as they come in. We will have a report on ash in India and a report on multi-pollutant control in India coming online within the next month or so. Thank you in advance for listening. I appreciate I've covered a lot of technical stuff very quickly, so I'll now have a quick look at the questions. However, as I say, the report is available online, and I'm prepared to ask you questions. My email address is at the bottom there. If you'd rather reply to me or ask questions independently of this talk, then please do so. Also, if anyone is interested in being involved in these training workshops, if you are a trained trainer and are prepared to travel to India to help us with this capacity building, then please do get in touch. We'll be very keen to hear from you. I have one quick question. How soon will these workshops be happening? Your guess is as good as mine. We plan to have, as I say, 4 regional workshops on India on these SEM training over the next 18 months. We have to be completed sort of mid-2023. So we will try and get 2 meetings back to back, so perhaps New Delhi and Mumbai at the same time, and then Raipur and Hyderabad maybe a couple of months later. These will be 4 to 5 day training workshops, giving sort of MCerts, if you know what MCerts training is like, or QISTI if you're in the States, that kind of level of training we hope to bring to the Indians. But obviously we can't be giving them QISTI or MCerts training because this is India, it needs to develop its own standards. We just want to fast forward through this standard development project. I have a question here. There's no national standard in India. Yes, I'm aware. It looks like India is not positive for net zero activity. Is there any, if there's no financial support? That's a very broad question. Yes, the challenge for India on getting down to net zero and phasing out carbon is a huge challenge, and no, I don't expect anyone believes India can do that without financial control and financial assistance, sorry. However, that is outside my remit. I would refer you perhaps to get in touch with our Managing Director, Andrew Mentioner, who is very au fait with questions such as this, and I'm sure could give you an excellent answer. Not seeing any other questions. Benedicta, Rebecca, can you see anything?
No, I think that seems to be it.
Excellent, thank you. Well, as I say, feel free to email me for more information and do download the report. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And all that's left for me to say is the slides from this webinar will be available to download from the webinar page of our website shortly. Thank you all for joining us today, and goodbye.